The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was huge, like a small moon made of metal and glass. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports. Today, something important was happening. The leaders of the Galactic Defense Coalition were meeting to talk about war. Inside the main hall, beings from across the galaxy sat around a giant, circular table. The room was beautiful, with walls that showed the stars outside. But the mood was serious. Everyone knew why they were here. The enemy was coming. They called themselves the Hegemony. For months they had been attacking planets on the edge of known space. Their black ships appeared without warning, destroyed everything and moved on. No one had been able to stop them. Admiral Velthar stood first. He was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to glow. His people, the Zephyrians, were known for building the most beautiful ships in the galaxy. Their vessels looked like art pieces that could fly through space. "My friends," Velthar said, his voice smooth like music, "we face a great threat. But we are not helpless. Look what we bring to this fight." The lights dimmed. A hologram appeared above the table, showing a sleek ship that looked like a crystal sword. It was long and narrow, with no visible weapons. Instead of metal, it seemed made of pure light. "The Starlance-class cruiser," Velthar announced proudly, "powered by stellar energy, armed with coherent light beams that can cut through any armor. We have built 50 of these magnificent vessels." The other aliens made sounds of approval. The ship was indeed beautiful. Next came Kristark Zexani from the Vortani people. She looked like a walking piece of living crystal, her body catching the light and throwing rainbows across the room. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "The Vortani offer our quantum shield technology," she said. The hologram changed, showing a diamond-shaped ship that sparkled with inner light. "Our dreadnoughts can phase in and out of normal space. Energy weapons pass right through us. We are untouchable." More approving sounds from around the table. The third speaker was Swarm Queen Rixka of the Krathari. She looked like a giant insect, but one that wore a crown and spoke with intelligence. Her people were masters of building many small ships that worked together like a hive mind. "We bring numbers," she clicked in her strange language, which was translated for everyone else. 1,000 carrier ships, 10,000 fighters. Our swarms will block out the stars." The display showed clouds of tiny ships moving like schools of fish through space. It was impressive and frightening at the same time. Then Ambassador Chen from Earth stood up. He was a small, quiet man who looked very ordinary next to all these amazing aliens. When he activated his hologram, the room went silent. The ship that appeared was ugly. There was no other word for it. It was a gray metal box with weapons sticking out of it like spikes. Big engines hung off the back, looking like they belonged on a construction vehicle. Next to the elegant alien ships, it looked like someone had brought a hammer to an art show. "This is the UES Indomitable," Chen said calmly. "Our prototype warship. She carries 800 crew members and enough firepower to level a city." Admiral Velthar made a sound that might have been laughing. "Forgive me, Ambassador, but this looks like... How do you humans say? A garbage truck with guns?" Several other aliens made similar sounds. Even Kristark Zexani, who was usually polite, seemed to sparkle with amusement. "Your species is young," Velthar continued, not bothering to hide his smile. "You have not learned the art of war. This crude construction might work for fighting other humans, but against real military vessels." He shook his head. "It would be destroyed in seconds." Chen's face did not change. "Captain Morrison and her crew are ready to prove otherwise." "Where are your energy weapons?" asked the Kristark. "I see only these primitive projectile systems." "Kinetic weapons," Chen replied. "We found they work quite well." This caused actual laughter from several aliens. Kinetic weapons meant shooting pieces of metal at the enemy. Everyone knew such weapons were outdated by thousands of years. Modern warfare was about energy beams, quantum shields, and elegant tactics. Swarm Queen Rixka clicked something that translated as contempt. "We stopped using such crude tools when we learned to make fire in space." "Your ship looks heavy," Velthar observed. "How does it maneuver? Where are its graceful lines? How can such a clumsy design hope to survive real combat?" Chen sat down without answering. Around the table, the aliens continued to discuss strategy. They talked about formation flying, energy weapon duels, and the proper way to conduct space battles. They spoke of honor and tradition, of tactics passed down for thousands of years. Nobody asked Earth for input. In the end, the coalition fleet was organized. The Zephyrian ships would form the main battle line with their energy lances. The Vortani dreadnoughts would use their quantum shields to protect the flanks. The Krithari swarms would provide fighter cover and reconnaissance. And Earth's single ship? Rear support duties, Admiral Velthar announced. Keep them safe with the supply vessels and medical ships. We cannot risk such an unusual design in real combat, Chen stood again. Captain Morrison requested permission to study hegemony tactics and battle reports. Of course, Velthar waved dismissively. Let the humans read about war. Perhaps they will learn something. As the meeting ended, the various aliens gathered in small groups, still chuckling about the human ship. They shared jokes about flying scrap metal and primitive barbarians. None of them noticed Ambassador Chen's quiet smile. Outside the station, the human ship Indomitable hung in space like a gray metal fortress. She was not beautiful. She was not elegant. But inside her hull, Captain Sarah Morrison studied the intelligence reports with her officers. They think we're a joke, said Commander Hayes, her tactical officer. Let them, Morrison replied, reading about hegemony attack patterns. Underestimation is a weapon, too. The aliens fight like it's a dance, observed Lieutenant Parker from the weapons station. All these rules and formations. Very predictable. Morrison nodded. She had fought in the Martian wars where there were no rules except survival. She knew the difference between fighting for honor and fighting to win. The hegemony uses kinetic weapons, too, she noted, pointing at the reports. But they use them wrong. They still think like the other aliens, just with different tools. Around her, 800 human crew members prepared for war. They cleaned their railguns and checked their targeting systems. They studied the enemy ships and looked for weak points. They did not care about honor or tradition or elegant tactics. They cared about going home alive. In 3 days, the coalition fleet would depart for the Kepler defense line. The aliens expected a glorious battle fought with ancient rules and beautiful maneuvers. They would line up their pretty ships and trade energy blasts like gentlemen dueling with swords. But Captain Morrison had read the intelligence reports carefully. She knew the hegemony would not fight like gentlemen. And when that moment came, when the elegant aliens realized their mistake, the ugly human ship might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The Indomitable was not beautiful. But she was ready. 3 weeks after the meeting at Nexus Prime, the war began in earnest. The attack came at dawn on the planet Kepler 442, a mining world on the edge of Coalition space. The warning reached the defense fleet in minutes. Hundreds of black ships had appeared out of hyperspace. The Kepler defense line was supposed to be unbreakable. 7 fortified worlds, each protected by orbital stations and planetary shields. Military experts said it would take months for any enemy to fight through such defenses. The hegemony proved them wrong in 6 hours. On board the Coalition command ship Eternal Glory, Admiral Velthar watched the reports come in with growing alarm. Each planet fell faster than the last. The enemy ships moved like a plague of locusts, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers and brutal efficiency. How many ships are we facing? He asked his intelligence officer. 200 confirmed, sir. Maybe more. They keep coming out of hyperspace. Velthar's blue skin grew pale. The largest fleet action in galactic history had involved maybe 50 ships per side. This was beyond anything in the military textbooks. And their flagship? The holographic display zoomed in on a massive vessel that dwarfed everything around it. It was 5 kilometers long, black as space itself, covered in weapon ports and armor plating. The sight of it made experienced officers step backward. They call it the Void Render, the officer reported. It has never been defeated in battle. Some say it cannot be destroyed. Velthar straightened his uniform. Fear was not acceptable for a Zephyrian officer. Assemble the fleet. We launch immediately. The coalition response was swift and organized. 150 ships from a dozen worlds converged on the rally point near the gas giant Prometheus. It was an impressive sight. The sleek Zephyrian cruisers with their energy lances, the crystalline Vortani dreadnoughts that sparkled like jewels, the swarming clouds of Krithari fighters, and at the back, almost forgotten among the supply ships, the gray bulk of Earth's Indomitable. Captain Morrison stood on her bridge, watching the alien vessels through the view screen. Her ship looked crude compared to their elegant designs, but she was not impressed by beauty. She had seen too many beautiful things break under pressure. Status report, she ordered. All systems green, replied Commander Hayes. Weapons loaded, engines at full readiness. The crew is ready for combat. Morrison nodded and turned to her communications officer. Any word from Coalition Command? We're assigned to rear support, as expected. Medical evacuation and supply protection. Of course we are. Morrison pulled up the tactical display showing the planned battle formation. The aliens intended to meet the enemy in a classic line of battle, their ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns. It was textbook fleet warfare, the kind taught in academies across the galaxy. It was also exactly what the enemy would expect. Lieutenant Parker, Morrison called to her weapons officer, what do you make of these hegemony ships? Parker studied the intelligence photos. They're built for war, Captain. No decoration, no wasted space, all armor and guns. But look here. She pointed to several design features. Their weapon placement is optimized for broadside combat. Classic battle line tactics. So they fight like the Coalition forces? Seems like it. Just more brutal about it, Morrison frowned. That was interesting. Most military analysts assumed the hegemony fought differently because they won so often. But what if they won simply because they were better at the same old tactics? Commander Hayes, pull up those battle reports from the Outer Rim. Show me how the hegemony actually fights. For the next hour, Morrison and her officers studied every scrap of intelligence they could find. The pattern became clear. The hegemony did use traditional tactics, but they executed them with overwhelming force and ruthless efficiency. They brought more ships than anyone expected, struck harder than anyone thought possible, and showed no mercy to defeated enemies. They're not revolutionaries, Hayes observed. They're just very good at conventional warfare. Which means they'll expect conventional responses, Morrison replied thoughtfully. The Coalition fleet reached the Prometheus system 12 hours later. Long-range sensors immediately detected the massive hegemony formation hiding behind the gas giant's largest moon. Admiral Velthar called a strategy meeting aboard his flagship. The plan was elegant and traditional. The Coalition would advance in line formation, using their superior energy weapons to engage at maximum range. The Vortani ships would phase shift to avoid return fire, while the Zephyrian lances punched through enemy armor. The Krethari swarms would provide fighter cover and exploit any gaps in the enemy line. What about the human ship? Asked Kristark Zexani. They will remain with the support vessels, Velthar replied firmly. This battle requires precision and coordination. We cannot risk disruption from amateur tactics, no one disagreed. The human ship was in curiosity, nothing more. Back on the Indomitable, Morrison received her final orders. Stay behind the main fleet. Protect the medical ships. Do not engage unless directly attacked. Under no circumstances break formation or interfere with Coalition battle plans. Well, said Hayes dryly, at least we'll have a good view of the show. Morrison stared at the tactical display. The two fleets were moving toward each other like dancers in a formal ballet. Everything was precise, predictable, following rules written thousands of years ago. It was beautiful in its way. It was also wrong. The hegemony had conquered dozens of worlds by following these same rules, just executing them better than anyone else. They had more ships, bigger guns, and absolutely no qualms about using maximum force. In a conventional battle, they would probably win through sheer brutal efficiency. Captain, said Lieutenant Parker quietly, I've been looking at the hegemony ship designs. They have some interesting weaknesses. Show me. Parker highlighted several areas on the enemy vessel schematics. Their armor is heaviest on the front and sides, where they expect return fire during line combat. But the rear sections are more lightly protected. And look at their engine configurations. Morrison studied the data. Human ships were built differently, designed for the chaotic battles of the solar system where any angle might face enemy fire. But these alien vessels, both Coalition and Hegemony, were optimized for formal engagements where ships faced each other across clear battle lines. Interesting, Morrison murmured. Very interesting. The fleets continued their approach. In 6 hours, they would be in weapons range. The aliens prepared for a traditional battle of energy lances and quantum shields, an elegant dance of destruction that would determine the fate of worlds. But Captain Morrison was thinking about different kinds of dances. She remembered the asteroid belt wars, where survival meant forgetting about formation and fighting like a cornered animal. She remembered lessons learned in blood about the difference between fighting to look good and fighting to win. Commander Hayes, she said quietly, begin discreet preparations for independent action. Ma'am, if this battle goes badly for the Coalition, we might need to try something different. Hayes looked at the massive enemy fleet on the display. With respect, Captain, we're one ship against 200. Morrison smiled grimly. Then they'll never see us coming. The battle began exactly as the textbooks predicted. Two fleets faced each other across the void, separated by millions of kilometers of empty space. The hegemony ships emerged from behind Prometheus's moon in perfect formation, their black hulls creating a wall of menace against the stars. Admiral Velthar stood on his bridge, watching the enemy deployment with professional interest. Despite their reputation for brutality, the hegemony forces were arranging themselves in a classic battle line. Their largest ships formed the center, with smaller vessels protecting the flanks. It was conventional, predictable, and exactly what Coalition forces had trained to fight. All ships advanced to weapons range. Velthar commanded, "Maintain formation. Prepare to engage on my signal." The Coalition fleet moved forward like a choreographed dance. Each ship held its precise position, energy weapons charging, shields at maximum power. It was beautiful to watch, the kind of space battle that military artists painted and poets wrote about. The first exchange came at extreme range. Brilliant lances of coherent light stretched between the fleets like deadly rainbows. The Zephyrian energy weapons reached out across space, striking hegemony shields in bursts of spectacular fire. Return shots answered immediately, the enemy beams slightly different in color but following the same ancient patterns. "Direct hit on their lead cruiser," reported the weapons officer. "Their shields are holding, but we're wearing them down." Velthar nodded with satisfaction. This was how civilized species fought wars. Clean, precise, efficient. Both sides would trade shots until one fleet's shields failed, then the victors would accept surrender from the defeated. Casualties would be minimal, honor would be maintained, and the galaxy would continue to function according to proper rules. The Vortani dreadnoughts began their phase-shifting maneuver, flickering in and out of normal space. Enemy shots passed harmlessly through their quantum-shifted hulls, while they maintained steady fire on the hegemony line. It was a tactic that had never failed in recorded galactic history. For 20 minutes, the battle proceeded exactly as expected. Both fleets hammered each other with energy weapons while maneuvering for tactical advantage. The Krathari fighters swarmed around the larger ships, engaging their counterparts in elaborate aerial displays. Shields flared and weakened, but no ships had been destroyed yet. Then everything changed. The hegemony ships suddenly shifted formation. What had looked like a standard battle line revealed itself as something else entirely. The enemy vessels spread apart, exposing massive weapon ports that had been hidden behind their elegant facades. "New contact," shouted the sensor officer. "Those aren't energy weapons." The first salvo of kinetic projectiles hit the Coalition fleet like a hammer blow. Solid chunks of metal traveling at significant fractions of light speed smashed through energy shields as if they weren't there. The beautiful barriers that had protected galactic fleets for millennia proved useless against simple, primitive matter. The Zephyrian cruiser Starlight Eternal took 3 hits in rapid succession. Metal projectiles punched through its hull, detonated its power core, and left it spinning helplessly in space. The ship's death was ugly, violent, and completely unlike the clean energy weapon kills that everyone expected. "Impossible," Velthar gasped. "They're using kinetic weapons. No civilized species uses such barbaric tools." But the hegemony wasn't finished. As the Coalition fleet reeled from the kinetic barrage, the enemy ships began deploying clouds of autonomous drones. Thousands of tiny robotic fighters swarmed toward the larger vessels, too small and numerous for traditional point defense systems to stop. The drones attached themselves to Coalition ships like metallic parasites, drilling through armor and exploding inside critical systems. The beautiful crystalline Vortani dreadnoughts found their quantum shifting useless against enemies that were already attached to their hulls. "All ships, close distance," Velthar ordered desperately. "We need to get inside their kinetic weapon range." It was a mistake. The moment the Coalition ships broke formation and charged forward, the hegemony sprang their trap. The enemy fleet wasn't retreating toward the gas giant's rings by accident. They were leading the Coalition into a prepared killing ground. Hidden among the ice and rock of Prometheus's rings were more hegemony ships. As the Coalition fleet charged forward, enemy vessels emerged from concealment on all sides. What had seemed like a fair fight became a slaughter. Energy lances meant for long-range dueling proved inadequate in close combat. The elegant maneuvering that defined galactic warfare became impossible in the chaotic furball around the ring system. Ships collided with asteroids, lost formation, and fell victim to concentrated enemy fire. The Krathari swarms, magnificent in open space, found themselves trapped and overwhelmed by superior numbers. Swarm Queen Rixka's fighters died by the hundreds, their intricate coordination disrupted by the chaotic battlefield. "Sir, we've lost 40% of the fleet," the tactical officer reported. "The Voidrender is moving to finish us." The massive Hegemony flagship had held back during the initial engagement, but now it advanced like a moving mountain. Its weapons turned entire Coalition vessels into expanding clouds of debris. Nothing the Coalition possessed could even scratch its massive armor. "All ships withdraw," Velthar finally ordered. "Fighting retreat to the outer system." It was over. The most powerful fleet in Coalition history was running from an enemy that had outthought, outmaneuvered, and outfought them using tactics that were supposedly primitive and outdated. The elegant traditions of galactic warfare lay in ruins along with dozens of beautiful ships. In the rear of the formation, Captain Morrison watched the disaster unfold from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her ship had not fired a shot, following orders to stay with the support vessels. Around her, medical ships prepared to receive casualties while supply vessels jettisoned cargo to make room for survivors. "My God," whispered Commander Hayes. "They're being slaughtered." Morrison studied the tactical display with professional detachment. The Hegemony had executed a perfect trap, using the Coalition's own expectations against them. They had presented a conventional front while preparing unconventional tactics. They had turned the rules of civilized warfare into weapons against those who followed them. "It's brilliant," she admitted. "Brutal, but brilliant." They understood that their enemies would fight according to ancient patterns, so they prepared for exactly that. "What do we do?" asked Lieutenant Parker. "Coalition Command is ordering all ships to retreat." Morrison looked at the fleeing alien vessels, many of them trailing atmosphere and debris. In a few hours, the survivors would reach the inner systems with news of total defeat. The Hegemony would follow. World after world would fall, and the galaxy would learn what conquest really meant, unless someone did something unexpected. "Belay that order," Morrison said quietly. "All stop. Maintain position, Captain." Hayes stared at her in shock. "We're ordered to retreat with the fleet." Morrison studied the enemy formation. The Hegemony ships were regrouping around their flagship, preparing to pursue the broken Coalition forces. They were confident, organized, and completely focused on finishing their victory. They weren't paying any attention to one ugly human ship sitting alone in the dark. "The Coalition fought this battle by their rules," Morrison said. "Energy weapons at long range, formal maneuvers, honorable tactics. The Hegemony was ready for all of that. So what do we do differently?" Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We fight by our rules. Plot an intercept course for the enemy flagship, all weapons to combat status, and send a message to the crew." "What message?" "Tell them it's time to show these aliens how humans make war." The Indomitable turned away from the retreating Coalition fleet and accelerated toward 200 enemy ships. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing impossible odds. But she was also something the galaxy had never seen before. A warship built by people who had learned to fight in the asteroid belts of Sol, where there were no rules except survival and victory belonged to whoever was willing to pay the highest price. The Battle of Prometheus was about to begin again. The communication from Coalition Command came through loud and clear. "UES Indomitable, you are ordered to withdraw immediately. Return to formation and retreat with the fleet." Captain Morrison looked at the message for a moment, then turned to her communications officer. "Cut that channel, Lieutenant. We're going dark. Ma'am, they're ordering us to retreat." "I heard them." Morrison's voice was calm, but her eyes were hard as steel. "And I'm choosing to ignore them. This is what we came here to do." She activated the ship's internal communication system. 800 human voices would hear her words. "All hands, this is the captain. The Coalition fleet has been defeated and is withdrawing. We are not withdrawing. We are going to engage the enemy." Silence filled the bridge for a moment. Through the view screen, they could see the massive Hegemony fleet regrouping around their flagship. 200 ships against one. It looked like suicide. "I know what you're thinking," Morrison continued. This looks impossible. But we have advantages they don't know about. We fight differently than they expect. We have weapons they've never seen used properly. And most importantly, we have 800 humans who know how to fight dirty when the stakes are high enough. Commander Hayes studied the tactical display. Captain, the void render alone outweighs us 50 to 1. How do we even scratch something that size? Morrison pulled up a detailed scan of the enemy flagship. Look at it, really look at it. What do you see? Hayes examined the massive vessel. It was indeed enormous, covered in weapons and armor. But as he studied the design, he began to notice things. The armor is heaviest on the forward sections and flanks. The rear has lighter protection. Keep looking. The weapons are arranged for broadside combat. Maximum firepower to either side, but weaker coverage above and below the main hull. And, Hayes paused, then his eyes widened. The engine section. Those huge drives make it maneuverable, but they're also the most vulnerable part of the ship. If we could get behind it. Now you're thinking like a human, Morrison said with approval. The aliens build their ships for formal combat. Face to face, broadside to broadside like old sailing ships. But we learned to fight in 3 dimensions, where the enemy could come from anywhere. Lieutenant Parker spoke up from the weapons station. Captain, I've been analyzing their point defense systems. They're designed to stop energy weapons and guided missiles. But our railgun, she smiled grimly. I don't think they know what to do with kinetic projectiles moving this fast. Morrison nodded. The galaxy had abandoned kinetic weapons thousands of years ago, as crude and inefficient. Energy weapons were cleaner, more precise, easier to control. But humans had stuck with kinetic weapons for space combat because they worked. And in the vacuum of space, there was nothing to slow them down. Battle stations, Morrison ordered. All departments report readiness. The reports came in quickly. Weapons ready, engines full power available. Shields at maximum. Medical standing by for casualties. Engineering, all systems green. Helm, plot an intercept course for the enemy flagship. Maximum acceleration. Ma'am, that will take us through the entire enemy fleet. That's the idea. They won't expect a direct attack. They'll think we're running away until it's too late. The Indomitable began to accelerate, her massive engines pushing the ship toward the enemy, at a rate that would have been impossible for the elegant alien vessels. Human ships were built like bricks, solid and functional, able to withstand acceleration that would crush more delicate designs. At first, the hegemony ships ignored the lone human vessel. They were busy regrouping after their victory, preparing to pursue the fleeing coalition forces. One small ship moving toward them didn't seem worth their attention. That changed when the Indomitable opened fire. The ship's main railguns began shooting at maximum range, far beyond what conventional wisdom said was effective. Tungsten projectiles streaked through space at tremendous velocity, impossible to see with the naked eye. The first hits took the hegemony completely by surprise. A destroyer on the edge of their formation suddenly exploded as a railgun round punched through its hull and detonated its power core. The ship simply came apart, metal fragments spinning into space. Target destroyed, reported Parker with satisfaction. Reloading. Admiral Thekmore, commanding the hegemony fleet from the bridge of the void render, stared at his displays in confusion. What happened to the severing blade? Unknown, sir. Some kind of kinetic impact. The human ship appears to be firing projectile weapons. Thekmore made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. One ship? They're attacking us with one ship? Destroy it. But destroying the Indomitable proved more difficult than expected. The human ship was fast. Faster than hegemony designers had thought possible. She cut through space on a direct course for the flagship, ignoring the smaller vessels that tried to intercept her. More importantly, she fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of maintaining a steady course and trading shots like a civilized warship, the Indomitable used what humans called evasive maneuvers. She twisted, rolled, and changed direction constantly, making it almost impossible for enemy weapons to target her effectively. The hegemony ships, built for formal line combat, couldn't adjust their tactics fast enough. Their weapons were designed to track large, predictable targets moving in straight lines. The chaotic movement of the human ship confused their targeting systems. She's firing again, reported the tactical officer. Another destroyer died, then a cruiser. The Indomitable's weapons were different from anything the hegemony had faced. Instead of energy beams that took time to charge and fire, the human railguns shot continuously. A steady stream of tungsten death that found its mark again and again. All ships converge on the human vessel, Thekmore ordered. Concentrate fire. The hegemony fleet began to respond, but Morrison had expected this. She activated a tactic that would have been impossible for any other ship in the galaxy. Execute battle pattern Omega, she ordered. The Indomitable suddenly accelerated even faster, her engines screaming at maximum power. Instead of trying to avoid the enemy fleet, she drove straight into the middle of it. It was the most dangerous maneuver possible in space combat, the kind of thing that got officers court-martialed for even suggesting. It was also completely unexpected. The human ship cut through the hegemony formation like a knife through cloth. Her weapons fired in all directions, targeting anything close enough to hit. Ships designed for elegant long-range combat found themselves in a point-blank brawl with an enemy that fought like a cornered animal. The Indomitable's armor was thick and practical, designed to take hits and keep fighting. The hegemony vessels, built for speed and firepower, proved surprisingly fragile when something actually got close enough to shoot back. Direct hit on their cruiser, Parker called out. She's breaking apart. Another destroyer down. Frigate squadron is scattering. Morrison watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The hegemony ships were powerful, but they were also predictable. They fought according to established patterns, following rules that had worked for centuries. The Indomitable fought like humans always fought when their backs were against the wall, with everything they had, using every trick they could think of. But the enemy was beginning to adapt. Smaller ships were moving to surround the human vessel, trying to box her in. The massive Void Render was turning to bring its main weapons to bear. Captain, Hayes warned, we're taking fire from multiple directions. Shields are holding, but not for long. Morrison nodded. Phase 1 was complete. She had punched through the enemy screen and reached the inner formation. Now came the really dangerous part. Weapons, prepare the main gun. Target the enemy flagship. Parker's hands flew over her controls. Spinal mount railgun charging. But Captain, even our main gun can't penetrate that armor. Morrison smiled. Who said anything about penetrating armor? Helm, plot a course for that asteroid field, and prepare to fire our entire torpedo complement. At the asteroids? At the asteroids. The Indomitable raced toward the nearby debris field, the massive Void Render following like a predator closing in for the kill. Behind them, the surviving hegemony ship struggled to keep up with the chaotic battle. Morrison waited until the perfect moment, then gave the order that would change everything. Fire torpedoes, all of them. The torpedoes streaked away from the Indomitable in a spreading pattern, but they weren't aimed at enemy ships. Instead, they struck the asteroid field that orbited Prometheus like a broken necklace of stone and ice. The explosions lit up space, sending chunks of rock tumbling toward the gas giant's gravity well. Admiral Thekmore watched from his bridge in confusion. Are the humans trying to clear a path through the asteroids? Do they think they can hide in that debris field? His tactical officer was equally puzzled. Unknown, sir. The torpedo strikes seem random. No obvious strategic purpose. But Captain Morrison knew exactly what she was doing. She had studied the local gravity patterns, calculated orbital mechanics, and timed everything perfectly. The torpedo explosions had knocked several large asteroids into unstable orbits. They were falling toward Prometheus, picking up speed as they went. Main gun ready, reported Lieutenant Parker. Morrison watched her tactical display, waiting for the perfect moment. The Void Render was closing fast, its massive bulk blotting out the stars. The enemy flagship's main weapons were charging, preparing to end this annoying human resistance once and for all. Fire. The Indomitable's spinal railgun discharged with a flash of electromagnetic energy, but instead of targeting the enemy ship, it aimed at one of the falling asteroids. The tungsten projectile, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, struck the rock mass and accelerated it even further. What had been a slowly tumbling asteroid became a relativistic projectile weighing millions of tons. Moore realized what was happening a split second before impact. Evasive maneuvers. All power to. The asteroid struck the Void Render amidships at tremendous velocity. The impact was beyond anything the ship's designers had ever imagined. Armor that could withstand direct hits from the largest energy weapons crumpled like paper. Hull sections that had never been damaged in decades of warfare simply ceased to exist. The massive flagship broke in half, its forward and rear sections spinning away from each other in different directions. Internal explosions lit up the debris field as power cores overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. The ship that had conquered dozens of worlds died in less than 10 seconds. The watching hegemony fleet fell silent in shock. Their invincible flagship, the symbol of their empire's power, was gone, destroyed by a primitive human trick that no civilized species would have even considered. But Morrison wasn't finished. The destruction of the Void Render had created chaos in the enemy formation, but there were still nearly 200 enemy ships to deal with. The Indomitable was damaged from her wild charge through the fleet, her shields failing and armor scarred by enemy fire. "Status report," Morrison ordered. "Shields down to 30%, reported Hayes. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. "Casualty reports coming in. "Weapons? Railguns operational, but we're low on ammunition. "Main gun needs 10 minutes to recharge." Morrison studied the tactical display. The hegemony ships were beginning to recover from their shock, moving to surround the lone human vessel. Without their flagship to coordinate them, they were fighting as individual units, but they still vastly outnumbered the Indomitable. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the intercom. "We've accomplished something no one thought possible. We've proven that human tactics work against superior numbers, but the fight isn't over." She paused, looking around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were afraid, she could see that. But they were also determined. They had come this far together. "The enemy is confused and leaderless," she continued. "They don't know how to fight an opponent who doesn't follow their rules. We're going to use that against them." The next phase of the battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of the formal, predictable engagements that defined space warfare, it became a running fight through the asteroid field. The Indomitable used the debris as cover, darting between rocks and using the irregular gravity to confuse enemy targeting. Human experience in asteroid belt mining and warfare proved invaluable. Morrison's crew knew how to navigate in 3 dimensions, how to use gravity wells and debris fields to their advantage. The hegemony ships designed for open space combat struggled to adapt. The Indomitable would appear from behind an asteroid, fire a devastating railgun burst at an enemy ship, then disappear behind another rock before return fire could reach her. It was hit-and-run warfare at its most basic level, the kind of fighting that humans had perfected in the early days of space colonization. One by one, enemy ships began to fall. A cruiser caught a railgun burst in its engine section and spiraled out of control into an asteroid. A destroyer tried to follow the human ship through a tight gap between rocks and miscalculated, crushing itself against stone. A squadron of fighters became lost in the debris field and ran out of fuel trying to find their way out. The hegemony forces, trained for overwhelming firepower and coordinated attacks, found themselves picked apart by an enemy that refused to stand still and fight properly. Their weapons were more powerful, their ships more numerous, but none of that mattered when they couldn't hit their target. After 2 hours of this deadly game of hide-and-seek, something unexpected happened. The hegemony fleet began to withdraw. "Sir," reported the tactical officer to the surviving hegemony admiral, "we've lost 47 ships to that single human vessel. The crew are beginning to panic. Some captains are requesting permission to retreat." Admiral Zekthul, who had assumed command after Thekmor's death, stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His mighty fleet, which had conquered world after world, was being defeated by one ugly human ship, using tactics that belonged in a museum. "This is impossible," he muttered. "They're primitive. They use crude kinetic weapons. Their ship looks like it was built in a scrapyard. Nevertheless, sir, they're winning." The truth was impossible to deny. The humans fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They ignored every rule of civilized warfare, used dirty tricks that no honorable species would consider, and somehow made it work. They turned asteroids into weapons, used debris fields as shields, and fought with a desperation that was terrifying to watch. "Signal the fleet," Zekthul finally ordered. "General withdrawal. We will regroup at the rally point and request reinforcements." The surviving hegemony ships began jumping to hyperspace, abandoning the battlefield to the lone human vessel. For the first time in their empire's history, they were retreating from an inferior force. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Morrison watched the enemy fleet disappear into hyperspace with mixed emotions. They had won, but at a cost. 37 crew members were dead, more were wounded, and her ship was barely holding together. "Captain," said Commander Hayes quietly, "we did it. We actually did it. Morrison nodded slowly. They had proven that human tactics could work against superior technology in numbers. But more than that, they had shown the galaxy something new, that there was more than one way to fight a war. Signal Coalition Command, she ordered. Tell them the hegemony fleet has been defeated and is withdrawing from the system. The response came back immediately, but it wasn't congratulations. It was confusion, disbelief, and demands for clarification. How could one ship accomplish what an entire fleet could not? The answer would reshape galactic warfare forever. Within days, military analysts from across the coalition would be studying recordings of the battle, trying to understand how primitive human tactics had defeated advanced alien technology. The age of elegant, ritualized space warfare was ending, replaced by something more brutal but far more effective. But for now, Captain Morrison and her crew simply sat in the darkness between the stars, their ugly gray ship drifting alone among the asteroids. They had come to this battle as an afterthought, a primitive curiosity tolerated by their sophisticated allies. They were leaving as the deadliest warship in the galaxy. The hegemony would be back, with more ships and better tactics. But they would never again underestimate the humans. Earth's prototype warship had been mocked as a flying scrapyard. Now it was the template for a new kind of warfare, one that would spread across the galaxy and change everything. The humans had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had announced their presence with the thunder of railguns and the wreckage of enemy fleets. The galaxy would never be the same.